subsequent years, riders took their final splashdown before it closed for good.
What would it take for Disney to close one of their most iconic attractions?
If you want to keep Splash Mountain the way it is, again, it is voluntary. It is
the long list of things people want to keep the way it is gets longer and longer, right?
There was nothing in the ride, I will stand by this even today, that in any way was detrimental to anybody.
And then there's the most important question, I think, that needs to be asked. Why now?
What do you say we go inside and take a look at this new attraction?
In 1989, Disneyland would open up one of the most iconic attractions in Disney history, Splash Mountain. It was so popular that they opened it up in 1992 in Walt Disney World as well.
It's the steepest, scariest, wildest, most thrilling attraction ever built.
Oh, come on, it's like this. You're like looking down, you can't see the bottom.
Suddenly there's a big old splash and getting all wet.
There were a lot of press events, marketing, tie-ins with fast food chains, and even this hip-hop rap dance.
On a daring dash, down a waterfall so rapid that you go split splash. Splash Mountain.
But where did the idea for Splash Mountain come from?
Dick Nunes, who was the president of Disneyland, had been very interested in getting a flume ride. Well, I felt if Disney's going to do a flume ride, we have to have a story that was really unique.
Disneyland had a park traffic flow problem. They needed to draw more guests into Bear Country, which was usually empty. Imagineer Tony Baxter was tasked with solving the problem. He had to make a way to find a log flume ride, but also tie it into the theming of Bear Country in order to make it fit.
America Sings had run its course. I couldn't see destroying all those figures, but I said, what about this? We use all the characters that are going to be scrapped from America Sings. So by the end of that day, we had a program, and it ultimately became Splash Mountain.
I'm Michael Eisner, head of Walt Disney, and I'm here at Disney's California Adventure in Anaheim for the opening of A Bug's Land, based on the miniature world of the Disney Pixar film A Bug's Life.
CEO Michael Eisner was a big proponent of using intellectual property within the parks. Tony Baxter thought that The Little Mermaid was too new and they couldn't bank on success with the movie. So he came up with another idea.
We were losing America Sings, audiomatronic show by Mark Davis. Much of the design Mark did for America Sings, he had done for the movie Song of the South.
Song of the South had been a pretty controversial movie in the public eye, but in an effort to save money with the use of the America Sings animatronics, Eisner thought they would see if public opinion had changed.
I remember Michael Eisner said, well, let's put it out again to see if there's still interest in this movie that's from the 40s, and I think it did better than it did when it came out. It was like very, very successful. We worked with the NAACP, tested it out on every group before we went forward with it. They were comfortable with that. They said that puts us in the framework of American history. Whatever the controversy is come up with, it's more related to what the film is. And
Joel Chandler Harris was born in 1848 in Georgia to an Irish immigrant mother. He developed a love of reading early on in his life, and despite his modest upbringings, his passion for storytelling would shape his future career. During the Civil War, Harris was hired by Joseph Addison Turner to work on the Turnwald plantation as a printing assistant for the newspaper The Countryman. His experiences on the plantation, particularly his interactions with the enslaved people who shared their stories with him, deeply influenced his later works, including his Uncle Remus tales. Harris's time on the Turnwald plantation exposed him to African American folklore. In his memoir On the Plantation, Harris romanticized plantation life, presenting a skewed view that glossed over the harsh realities of slavery. His accounts often portrayed the enslaved as content and loyal. Harris created the character Uncle Remus, drawing from his experiences on the Turnwald plantation. For over 16 years, he published several collections of Uncle Remus stories, which became widely popular. Harris's work became ingrained in American pop culture, and a lot of kids' only exposure to the South and what went on in slavery and during those years were seen through the lens of Joel Chandler Harris. One of the heavy criticisms about Joel Chandler Harris was, while he told the tales that the black storytellers had passed on to him, he also then created a fictional character and passed it on as his own and made money off the cultural stories of the people that originally told them.
Presenting this week from Fantasyland, a tribute to Joel Chandler Harris.
One of the most entertaining chapters in American folklore was supplied us by the wonderful Uncle Remus stories of Joel Chandler Harris.
Walt Disney loved Uncle Remus stories from childhood, and in 1939 he bought the rights from Harris's children. Post-war, the Walt Disney Company was in a very precarious position. Walt Disney faced financial difficulties due to World War II and sought out new revenue streams. He believed Harris's stories were perfect for his ambitious plans. He also knew the material was contentious. Criticisms of the production and film largely objected to the reinforcement of stereotypes, such as the subservient status of black characters, the costuming, the way they were dressed in poor, raggedy clothing, the exaggerated dialect, and other archaic depictions of black people. The Hayes Office, which reviewed the screenplay outline, recommended the removal of insensitive terminology and questionable character choices. Despite those recommendations, the issues persisted. Black actor and writer Clarence Muse was also hired as a consultant for the screenplay. However, he quit when his suggestions to portray black characters in a dignified manner beyond Southern stereotypes were ignored. Muse also wrote letters to the editors of black publications criticizing the depiction of African Americans in the script. The screenplay's original writer, Dalton Raymond, had never written a screenplay before and never would again. His lack of experience and use of racial stereotypes raised concerns about his ability to produce a viable script. To address these issues, Walt Disney Productions hired Maurice Rafe, a notable live-action screenplay writer at the time, to work with Raymond on creating a usable screenplay. According to Neil Gabler, one of the reasons Disney hired Rafe was to temper what Disney feared would be Raymond's white Southern slant on the project. However, due to creative differences, Rafe was eventually removed from this project. Rafe supposedly had a hand in removing many of Raymond's offensive phrases and added dialogue to clarify that the film was set after the end of slavery. Although the Hayes Office had originally asked Disney to include a section at the beginning of the film to clearly establish the date in the 1870s, the final film carried no such statement. Reviewers from the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People stated that they were confused by the film's reconstructionist setting. Upon release, there was picket lines set up in theaters of major cities where the film played. Protesters held signs up reading Song of the South as an insult to the Negro people and chanted Disney tells lies about the South. In Oakland, California, protesters marched around the Paramount Theater with signs reading, "We want films on democracy, not slavery," and "Don't prejudice children's minds with films like this." Now, it's worth noting that the NAACP recognized the artistic merit in the film's music and the combination of live actors and cartoon technique. However, they regretted that in an effort to avoid offending audiences in both the North and the South, the production perpetuated a dangerously glorified picture of slavery. By using the Uncle Remus folklore, Song of the South unfortunately gave the impression of an idyllic master-slave relationship, which is a distortion of the facts. Song of the South went on to be released in 1972, 1980, and 1986. And then it had been decided to turn Song of the South into Splash Mountain. Eisner had them remove the most problematic aspects from the ride and focused on the animated characters. Imagineers avoided the characters of Uncle Remus, highlighting Brer Rabbit, Brer Fox, and Brer Bear instead. And while the ride and the movie aimed to entertain, they also contributed to a romanticized and sanitized narrative of the past. In fact, growing up, when I was a kid going to Splash Mountain, I had no idea what the characters were even based on. And for many years, the ride became a beloved ride within American culture, and Disney was fully content in leaving it, which leads me to the original question, why now?
The death of George Floyd hasn't just horrified people in America, but the effects of what's happened on a street corner in Minneapolis on the 25th of May are being felt around the globe.
In 2020, the world was completely different. It had changed. Thanks to the Black Lives Matter protests that were sparked by the killing of George Floyd, the way that black people have been treated throughout history and portrayed became a talking point on all major platforms. In all of the research that I've done and everything that I've read, I think that Walt Disney grew up loving the stories and wanted to present them to the public in the way that he knew how. Now, in saying that, the Walt Disney Company did not do anything when they were told about what could be wrong with the script. Instead, they decided to sanitize it completely and make the stories more palatable. Don't get me wrong, they very easily sat around for many years with the ride open, very happy not to change anything. But in 2020, the world was forced to take a look and re-examine.
I didn't even know about this movie, a movie called Song of the South, where they depicted slaves merrily living with their master.
I mean, look, maybe there's going to be this big movement that's justice for Splash Mountain, but the truth is Disney is in this, got caught up in the culture war.
I half wondered to myself, if Disney didn't announce this during the Black Lives Movement, when things were heated up and at its peak, and if they didn't retheme it to another black story, and if they didn't close it because of the implications, would people even care to this point? Disney rides change all of the time. I'm someone who's on a constant path of learning and growing and listening. And I'm in a phase in my life where I just want to listen. I want to hear stories. When I think about representation, I don't understand what it means to not be represented.
Imagine growing up in a world where you are overlooked. What if you do not see yourself anywhere? What if you don't feel any connection?
I remember we first seen him turn back and look at us, and we were like, whoa, it just took us aback. And I said, does he notice that this looks like him? And just to see his reaction afterwards as he sat down on the floor and just tuned in, as you can see in that video, and he just also clapped.
Recently there were some viral videos that went out of kids seeing themselves represented for the first time. The looks on their faces, how beautiful it was, what it meant to them. Is that worth trading to preserve an old ride? You know what? It's okay to love Splash Mountain. It's okay to say it was your favorite. It's okay to be sad that it's gone. But at the same time, reflect and ask yourself, is this a mountain worth dying on?
See your sunshine, splish splash in my way, zippity doo dah, zippity yay.